fine.
Cool.
Yeah. we can do amazing things in post. Marcus Ryan, welcome to the Dusty Allen Show.
It's nice to be here, Dusty. Thanks for having me.
Mate, it's been, as with probably a lot of guests that I have, a long time coming because I'm a bit of a procrastinator of these things. We got you here, mate, and I feel like it's like not so much opportunistic, but glad to get in a sweet spot because you're sometimes a hard man to pin down because, safe to say, you move around a lot.
I do. I get around. And I think when we talked about doing this, you were in the early stages and I was in early stages of trying to do a podcast, and so hats off to you for actually making it happen. I'm still in the works, but I'm never in one place, so it has been very hard to do.
It's one of those things that it's a passion for me, and I feel like if it wasn't for, so obviously we've known each other for a while, if it wasn't for the pandemic and the lockdowns, I never would have got this started, and it's butters along, I suppose, so based on my willingness to commit to it, but also availability of good guests and things. But whenever I sit down, I'm like, I need to do more of this. So, mate, we're getting there. And if you ever get yours going, and you need some C grade talent, you know who to call.
I actually did. I've recorded a couple, and it was so during the pandemic, I got a grant for a bunch of gear, and I had it set up, and I tested it out. And I took it to a venue where some musician friends of mine were touring, and I said, "All right, let's do it." And we did it on stage the night, I think it was the day before or the early afternoon before their gig. No, it was the night before, and we'd set it all up, and everything was ready to go. And then for some reason, when it came to doing the actual recording, the whole system just didn't work, and the SD card or whatever was in there wasn't functioning, nothing was recording. So we ended up we had all the mics set up, all the gear, it all looked great. We had it on camera, and we ended up just recording it on somebody's phone. So we did it so it looked like, oh, this is amazing, what a setup, all the tech gear. And the audio was just off a phone right behind the thing, so no one could tell what was going on. And it actually came out great. I just haven't uploaded it yet. So I've got a few out there that I've got, and I thought I'd sort of get the stock ready to go before I release them. Otherwise, I wouldn't have anything up my sleeve. But still not ready to go.
Well, you're a man of many talents, and I've got you on the show here because I said, I've known you for, it would be, I reckon, 15 years now from maybe my first stint in Canada, or is it maybe 2010? Where we crossed paths on a living room floor or somewhere. You might have been. I'd
probably say 2005. I was in Canada. I don't know if you were there then.
End of 2007. Anywho,
yeah,
it's been a while, and you're, as I said, man of many talents, and you're a comedian by trade. And I want to start with, like, how did you get onto that path? Like, is it something where you ask, when I grow up, I'm going to be a comedian, and you're actually doing it? Like, take me back to the start, the genesis of it. And
I was going to say, I love that a lot of your guests have been pro athletes and in the sports industry, and you've just gone, nah, stuff that. Let's get some. Or you've thought I was an athlete, and I appreciate that. You know,
hang on, I'll fire our researcher if that's not the case. You're not an elite then? No.
I was a MVP in the under 12s basketball grand final, and I got 9 points, so I was best on. So I'll take it, you know. And I won a coach's award in footy. My brother always coach's award. Yeah, that's not an award. That's just
back then they meant something.
That's an encouragement. So good on you. Yeah, that's the participation ribbon of the of whatever era it was, the early 90s. So comedy. It's something I just I wouldn't say fell into. You're born with it, I think, or it's a part of your nurture. I'm the youngest of 4 children, and I think being the youngest, there's a lot of statistics for entertainers in general. The youngest child wants to stand out. They need attention, and that's pretty spot on. You crave attention somehow because you feel like you're being left behind, and I figured that's where it sort of came from. So I was doing a lot of plays in drama class and things like that, and I mimicked my older brothers and things like that. So I was able to do impressions and make people laugh. And it's also a good defense mechanism, humour, to get away from being beaten up by your older siblings. If you can use wit instead of muscle, then it's a good way to get through life.
And did you have, when you were obviously doing the performing arts and things in schools, because I can relate somewhat, like I did pantomimes in primary school and in high school, and never thought that, even though I enjoyed it, and in some ways I'd say I was okay at it, but by what measure I don't know.
Yeah.
Was it something you knew early on? It's like, yep, I want to have a crack at this as a career, like post-school?
Well, I wanted to do drama. I wanted to do acting classes when I was about 10, I think. And I begged to get driven. I lived in a regional town, so 2 hours outside of Melbourne. And I wanted to go to Melbourne to do these classes, and I remember having 3 older brothers. I'm one of 4 boys, so it was quite easy for our parents just to put us all in the same swimming class or the same football program, basketball, because it was easy for them just to deal with us in one go.
Yep.
If you had 4 kids wanting to do 4 different things, that would be a nightmare logistically on weekends and after school with training and stuff. So for my parents to then say, oh, well, one of the kids wants to go off and do something in Melbourne, it was just not feasible. So I kind of got rejected in that request as a child. It's like, yeah, but my dream isn't playing footy. Clearly I'm not. I've shown that with my 1 coach's award.
So please, it's like, yeah, sign me up.
So I kind of resented that a little bit because I wasn't given that chance to grow at a young age doing what I wanted to do. So once I got to the age where I could do what I wanted, I went for it.
And what did that look like? Did you just get the hell out of Wonthaggi and like move to Melbourne, or what was the first step that you would have been like the turning point to set you on that path?
Well, funnily enough, the first job I got, I was quite shy as a teenager. I did a lot of the things where you're a school leader. So I was doing presentations and that kind of stuff. So I contradicted myself. I was shy and nervous, yet I would get up on stage and talk in front of a group, and that was fine. But get me off stage, I didn't want to be in that group. I couldn't talk to people close up unless I knew them very well. But on stage to talk at people, it was fine. And that's a very common thing with performers as well.
Being able to switch on, do you step into like a character almost?
It's kind of like an introverted thing. You're very comfortable talking at people, just not with people. So it sounds rude, I suppose, but like on stage, you're doing a thing, like it's your thing, whereas you're in control. I guess it's a control thing as well. So I was able to do those things, but I had no idea how to go out and become a comedian. I knew I was funny. I had people tell me I could do comedy, but there's no comedy clubs in my hometown. There was no outlet for that kind of thing. And I actually didn't like the idea of going off to do drama school or something like that. So I just wanted to go straight into stand-up comedy. And I was at home, I couldn't figure it out. And then I think in high school we got taken to a comedy club in Melbourne as a part of an excursion. It was very strange to be 16 or 17 years old being in a comedy club because it felt so risque. Like the comedians on stage were doing rude jokes and we were like, oh, we shouldn't be here. And I loved it. I had classmates in that room. I remember nudging me saying, oh, you're going to do this, aren't you? And I said, yeah. And I think a few years later, I just went to Melbourne. I quit my job and I said, I'm moving to Melbourne. I'm going to be a comedian. And then I just did.
I love the fact that
after a long time, it wasn't just like overnight. Oh, I'm a comedian. But
what's the first step? Is it your open mic nights? Is it you sort of scour around and look to build a bit of a network and you just get in there and like? Do you remember your first gig or time on stage like after school? Yeah.
Well, my first gig was. My first job was a radio station, and my mum got me that job, which was embarrassing to think about at the time, but I had no direction. I had no idea how to get out of the house and into the real world. My mum worked at a clinic, in a hospital clinic type thing, chemist, and above there, that pharmacy was a radio station in our regional area. And my mum went up there one day just being nosy and said, can my son come and do some work experience or something?
That was so good back then. It's like work experience, basically just try and weasel your way in.
I think she just wanted to get me out of the house as well.
Yep.
I was 18. All my friends had gone off to uni or TAFE or got apprenticeships, and I just couldn't think of what to do in my life because I didn't know how to go out and network or be a comedian. I didn't know what the next step was. I was frozen and very shy as well. And then my mum just came back one day and said, I've got you an interview. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, oh, there's a job. I said, okay, sure. I went in there wearing my best, I didn't have good clothes, tracksuit pants and a flannelette shirt. I don't know what's formal or what to do. I went in and they just gave me a job straight away. So it was just nuts. I was the breakfast announcer at a regional radio station.
So no experience, just straight in there?
None at all. I was making more money than all of my friends because they were all, back then, this was 99, I think, 98, 99. All my friends are on sort of $100 a week as an apprentice or whatever they were doing. And I was getting $280 a week.
Were there the perks of working in radio? And a question I've got, myself grew up small town, had a radio station. Obviously, it's been more centralised now and it's very different. But they had this thing called the Prize Patrol where they would have a car from the local dealership. It's like the Radio West Prize Patrol, and they'd say, we are at the corner of Clive Street and Daping Street, and you get down here real quick, you get a sticker, you'll get a CD single and a chock milk, and you would have your bike flat out to get down there to get to the Prize Patrol. Did they have something like that?
No, we had Farm World, which still happens. I got to do an outside broadcast there once, which was great. And we had to go out there and just do actually, I don't think it was a broadcast. We went there. We had these polo shirts with our names embroidered on it. So I've still got those, and they still fit, weirdly. This was 23 years ago, 25 years ago, something. And we had to go there and just represent our station and meet people and things like that. But there was none of that competition thing. It was a straight country music, retired listeners, farmers. We just played music. We could barely say anything in between the songs. I didn't even say my name for about 5 months on air. I was just, hello, this is blah, blah, blah. These are the next songs, play it, and that was the instructions.
You didn't get to freestyle at all or sort of have any off-the-script stuff?
Not until I realised I could do a volunteer job afterwards. So I volunteered a shift a week, and I got a friend in, and we just made up our own radio show. Essentially, if we had have recorded those shows, it would have been the first idea of what a podcast was.
Right.
Because we just made up our own show. It was the Marcus and Nathan Hour or whatever we called it, and we just played whatever songs we wanted, but we did sketches. We did made up comedy sketches. We did fake ads. We did voices. We had a lot of fun, and that was the 1 hour where I was free to do whatever I wanted, and the rest was just straight music. The rest of the time I did make little jokes because we had a thing called Jock's Journal. It was this piece of paper that had, on that day in history, it told you the birthdays, famous people, famous deaths, famous events that occurred, and that was little bits of trivia you could throw in between songs. And did you know on this day, Evel Knievel jumped the blah, blah, blah. And one of them was Shane Gould. It always sticks in my head because a guy that listened to the station once, who knew my dad, he met me one day and he goes, "Oh, I remember you did this joke about Shane Gould," and he loved it, and I thought it was the worst joke because Shane Gould had won 5 gold medals or something. Yeah. And I just made a very bad joke. Shane Gould, if you take the U out of Gould, you get gold. So that makes sense.
Hey, mate.
It was lame, but he loved it. I'm like, well, there you go. I've done my first radio joke.
Did you do horoscopes?
No, No, I didn't do horoscopes. We had a guy came in and did the tide times. I'm old, Dusty. I'm 44 now, right? And when I started, it was 8-track cassettes that went in.
Wow, okay.
We had reel-to-reel. So I had to line up the reel-to-reel where you played records and CDs that always jumped. CD player was the new thing. And so everything was like dodgy. But it was – so we had a guy, an old guy, he would have been about 80 at the time. He came in and he'd pre-recorded all of the tide times to tell people about fishing. He had a lisp. So, hello, it's Max here and down at Inverloch Jetty, it's 4:35 a.m. low tide. I was 18 years old hanging out with, octogenarians or octogenarians? Octopus.
There's a charm to that. And I remember when Merrick and Rosso were big on Triple J, and they had that guy who'd call in just with his local butcher specials for the week. And it's like national radio and stuff. But then it sort of grew and they had, what was it, Tight Ass Tuesday, Hello Australia. I think radio peaked in like the late 90s, early 2000s.
Well, the poop shoot, Martin Malloy was always my favourite as well. I don't know if I should talk about this, but maybe I could, just because you mentioned the butcher. So we had a local butcher who did sponsored ads, it's just because you said butcher, I have to tell this now, and we're in the radio station. So my job was to be on air from 6 till 9 a.m. and then I would hang around the studio for a few hours and then record some ads, do some voiceovers for some commercials, do some editing stuff. So I got to learn that sort of thing. And then I'd go back on air for an hour at lunch and go home and go to the beach. It was a very easy job and a very fun job at 18. It was great, except that I had to go to bed quite early to wake up early and be up at 5. But besides that, it was a lot of fun. One of the sponsors was a butcher down in Gippsland, and I had to talk to the apprentice every week, and he was my age. And I didn't know this guy. I'd never met him, but he was friends of friends, so there was some kind of mutual connection, but never saw him face to face. I've still, to this day, never met the guy. That every week I had to ring him and ask him, what are your specials, whatever. And then they would do this thing. They'd get online and go, get on the phone and go, "G'day, it's Pete from blah, 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 Butchers. We've got sausages, $5, whatever. Call us on blah, 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 blah." And that was it. I'd hang up the phone and go, "Thanks, mate." And then I'd go and edit that together on the computer and then put it up, and it would go on air the next day when I'm on air in the morning at the prime time, because they were one of the good sponsors, right? And him and I were the same age, and every weekend we would both go to Melbourne in our own circles of friends and go out and hang out and do our nightclubs or whatever we did. And we were 18, we were out trying to meet girls and get hickeys on our necks and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So one time we'd always chat before we did the actual proper recording. We'd say, "Oh, what'd you get up to on the weekend?" "Oh, yeah, I went to this nightclub." "Oh, yeah, I went to the footy." "Oh, yeah, cool." "Oh, did you make out with any girls?" That kind of thing. And one time I had received a blowjob, if we can talk about that. Yep.
That's fine.
I don't know why I'm shy to say this, but yeah, I received a blowjob. Thank you. You can.
Well, hey, congratulations.
We can edit
That's
in
great.
some. Is there some balloons and things like that? And I guess I must have told him, "Oh yeah, I hooked." It was probably, at that time it was exciting because it was probably one of the first times that it ever happened to me in my life. So it was like, "Oh, I've got to tell you," and I'm telling a complete stranger on the phone. Anyway, he does his ad promotion, and then at the end of his tag, he says, "Come on into the Butchers. You can come on in, call us on this number, or you can go and suck Marcus's dick." Now, we used to mess around so much on air, but I'd always edit things out, and it was always, it was just a joke, and I knew I was going to edit it out. For whatever reason, I don't know what it was, I had forgotten to edit this out. The next day, I'm on air at 7:30 in the morning. I've just played the news. They are the first ad to come on after the news. All the farmers, all the old retired people, that's their radio station. It is the prime time in the morning. There's not a lot of people, but still 5,000 to 10,000 people listen to this station. And I've got a space bar on a computer keyboard which plays and stops the buttons. And I play the thing, the ad goes on, and then as soon as he'd finished his phone call, the phone number, there was silence. And it was all in slow motion. I listened and then I heard that, or you can go and do that to Marcus. And not only it wasn't just like a swear word, like an accidental slip up. It was a direction to the audience. It's like, you can do this to the guy who's on air right now. It was very vulgar, very wrong, and it was just so bizarre. And I heard it and I just freaked out. My heart stopped. Everything was in slow motion. I just slammed the button down to go to the next ad or whatever it was. And I looked up. We had a light bulb in the studio. It would flash when the phone rang. Now, obviously, so your phone didn't ring. And I was the only one in control. And then this is at 7:30 in the morning. The boss wasn't around. There was no other staff in the building. It was just me. And if we had a head office guy who sometimes used to listen in. And when I first started, he would ring up. You know, if I even sneezed on air, if I accidentally coughed, whatever it was, he would ring up and go, Marcus, you're coughing or you're sneezing. Don't do that. You know, that's. So I was paranoid whenever the light bulb went off because I thought I'd done something wrong. This is 6 months into my job. They weren't really listening in a lot anymore, but I was waiting for this light bulb to go off. I was in panic. I was staring up at this light bulb thinking, did that really just happen? I have no idea. I'm freaking out. The light bulb didn't budge. Not one listener rang in. I think it was so bizarre and unexpected that you wouldn't think that would be said on air, that anyone who actually heard it probably just thought, nah, that couldn't have happened. Surely.
So no consequences.
Nothing one happened. Single phone call. And I rang my brother between the songs. You know, I put on a long song next. I was like, I need time to think. And I rang my brother and I said, mate, I've got to confide in you. This just happened on air. I'm going to lose my job. What do? I'm going to get sacked. It's my only ever job I've ever had. What should I do? And he just laughed his head off. So, you know, well done, brother. Thanks very much. He gave me no support whatsoever. I ended up telling my boss who was coming in later that day. I just freaked out and told him. And then I rang the butcher and told him what happened. And the butcher's boss, credit to him, he said to me, mate, if you get sacked for what was said on air today, we will pull all of our advertising. I was like, wow, you guys have got my back. That is amazing. Felt good. Yeah. And nothing happened. Nobody, not one complaint. And I genuinely thought it didn't go to air. There was something about it that made me think not one person ever found out. Until about a year later, one of my best mates' dads, who's a farmer, he saw me randomly and he says, oh, yeah, did you ever get in trouble for that blowjob joke? So it did happen, but not one person acknowledged it.
There was no digital radio back then, so there's no way anyone could have recorded it unless by chance they were recording news. So it was into the ether after that. And
we didn't have the 7 second. Is it 7 seconds in radio? Yeah, that wasn't a thing. So look, it happened. I still find it bizarre that not one person rang in, but anyway, I got away with it, so that was hilarious.
Hearing that, when you were telling that, I was like, okay, this is how his career in radio finished, and then he went off to other things. But yeah, how much longer did you stay at the radio station after that?
I think it was about a year and a half. I worked there, so up until early 2000s, I quit my job and I said to my dad, I said, look, I want to do comedy, and I'm going to quit my job. And he couldn't understand it. Yeah. But I did. I quit the job after doing one gig. I had one stand-up comedy show, and I thought, yeah, I'm hooked. So
no safety net, just went and...
no, I handed in my resignation. I handed it in. I just said, I'm leaving. There was no... Yeah, it wasn't those days. I just said, yeah, I'm going to go become a comedian. Yep. And in hindsight, I probably could have just kept the job and gone down to Melbourne on weekends and tried comedy. But I just thought I have to move. I have to get out of this right now. Otherwise, I'll be stuck. Yeah.
Well, what's the next segment look like for you? So you moved to Melbourne. Like, then what? What's the next couple of years? Like, how did you leverage that, like the early days, into then going overseas?
Well, the first gig I ever did was actually in regional Victoria, and it was a huge audience. It was about 500 people. There was a big comedy night happening at one of our local pubs, and I got to know. I got to get my way onto the gig, which was cool, and there were some famous people. A few guys off Full Frontal,
Yep.
Back in the day. Tim Smith, Peter Rosethorn from Kath and Kim.
So some big names.
Yeah, yeah.
Especially probably bigger back then.
Oh, definitely. And Tim Smith was on. He was like one of the breakfast radio guys in Melbourne on Triple M at the time, and Steve Bedwell. So Timbo was on the gig because he had connections down that way. Anyway, I got to do 5 to 10 minutes on the gig. A lot of people I knew were there. It was nerve-wracking. I was doing shots before the gig. I didn't know what to do. Apparently it went okay. I didn't have it filmed because it was back when you had to have like video cameras not many people had video cameras before smartphones. So there's a couple of photographs, but I really wish I had had it filmed just so I could look back and see how bad it was. But that was the first thing that got me excited. So I just said, yeah, I'm going to quit and become a comedian. I moved to Melbourne, and I think in that first year I did 12 gigs. It was so not bad, but I just didn't know how to get about it. So
Was that all you were doing? So you were getting by off 12 gigs, or
no? I mean, there was no money. I mean, there's no money for several years in comedy, but it was. I was trying to get jobs. I was lost. I was 20 years old. I was trying to get a job. I was trying to learn how to live outside of my parents' house for the first time with flatmates who were friends. I was trying to get around to do gigs, introduce myself to people. So step out of my shell a lot, and I couldn't hack it. I was feeling very overwhelmed, I think would be the best way to say it. And I moved home after that, and I spent another year back at home doing bar work. And I think it was the bar work that really got me confident again, because I was able to talk to people who were adults but from behind a safety net and deal with customer service. And I think that was where you become quite a character as well. When you're the one who can stop old guys from having beer, they tend to sort of, they treat you like crap, but they also respect you a little bit. So,
well, there's that element of like pubs where, like you call it, that shit talk, where it's like, oh, how you doing, mate? Yeah, you know, blah blah blah, and getting copping it at home or whatever their reason is. And I want to go back a step. So, what did it feel like when you went home? What emotions came up around that?
I think I felt like a failure to an extent. I mean, I was out of my depth. I didn't know what I was doing. At the time, I was probably feeling touch of depression, maybe anxiety, but I don't think, and this is 2001, I don't think even the words depression and anxiety were used they were far from mainstream. I mean,
words in a dictionary, I reckon.
Yeah, and I didn't know that I had depression or anxiety. I didn't know what to even label it. So I think I was just like, I was super shy, and yet I was relying on drinking to help me be social, those kind of things. So I went back home. I had to regroup. The place I lived in was fine with my buddies. We stayed friends, but I just couldn't. I couldn't just get jobs. I was doing random jobs. I was a garbo for 4 weeks. I was doing extras in movies. I was just trying to do anything I could do that wasn't a real job.
Right.
And that's still to this day is the way I try and live.
Well, we'll go for, because obviously you've done shows. I'd say I'm having a stab here on almost every continent except Antarctica. Would that be right?
Yeah, I get upset when I can't put Antarctica down
on there. Hey, you never know. Maybe that's the audacious goal.
It is the next goal. It's one of them.
And you, like, from what I'll consider like a successful comedian, because you've made a living from being a comedian.
Yeah.
And then tell me about some of the highs and lows of that. who lives that life.
Yeah, well, I'll take you back to 2002. I started going back into Melbourne doing gigs, and then I ended up moving back to Melbourne, and I was doing a competition called Raw Comedy, and that was a big Australian open mic kind of thing, and I ended up being runner-up in that, which is they filmed it on the ABC, and it was in the Melbourne Town Hall. So it was in front of about 2,000 people. I did really well. And one of the judges is from Scotland, and she offered the winners of that get to go to Edinburgh and do a festival show, and they get flown over. I was offered to go over and do the same show as part of a showcase thing, except I had to pay my own way. At this stage of my life, I was feeling isolated in Australia. I felt like, not just Australia, but I felt like I needed to escape. I needed to do something big or change. And so I wanted to travel and to really step out of my comfort zone. And that offer to go overseas I just jumped at it. And I said, yeah, that's the incentive. I don't think I would have gone if I hadn't had someone tell me to go, like to really push me. Because I was too shy to really, go for things. So I got invited to go, and that was my first time going overseas. I'd never been on a plane before.
Right.
So I was 23 and I flew to Thailand. My brother actually convinced me, he said, take 2 weeks and go to Thailand before you go to Europe and do the shows. And so I had a 2-week holiday in Thailand by myself, and that was just a huge eye-opener. For me, it was still one of my favourite countries because of the first place I went to that was just so different to Australia. And then I went to Europe, and I was in Edinburgh Fringe, which is one of the biggest arts festivals in the world, or the biggest. And then I travelled around Europe with some friends for 6 weeks or something. And I was bitten with the bug. I knew I had to travel for the rest of my life.
That was the circuit breaker, like that trip to just change things up, and
yeah, that was it. And it screwed me over because I don't know how to stop. Like I ever since that trip, I came back to Australia for a friend's wedding, and then I was trying to find a way to go back overseas. So I ended up traveling again, and then for the next 10 years, I became based in London. I was doing gigs in London, and then from there, bookers who I worked with in London flew me to Barcelona to do a weekend of gigs, and that was exciting. It's like, wow, I'm doing a gig in Spain. And then the next step was to go to Ireland, and then Scotland, and other parts around the UK, but then Europe with Ireland and Northern Ireland, and then random countries would pop up. And then it became just an exciting way to see the world. And I think it just clicked after a while. Oh, I can travel and do comedy, and that was a dream. So I think that's when it really sunk in that I could make a living as a touring comedian. A very bad living, but a living. I was alive.
Because that is not the narrative that a lot of people, let's say a lot of Aussies, would do. It's more like, okay, you finish school, you either get a trade or you go to uni or TAFE, and you sort of work out what you're doing, and then you get maybe a bit of travel. You go do your working holiday, that sort of thing. You get to your mid-20s and it's like, okay, the job, the partner, the husband, the wife, the house, the picket fence, the family. And obviously you would have been down the path realising that you weren't adhering to that particular narrative. And I know as well, like I've lived overseas, and at times you feel like, oh, I'm not doing what everyone else is doing. And there's that ethereal heat. You feel like, oh, I'm not doing. And then you've got, I'm guessing, something like parents going, oh, when are you coming home? When are you going to stop doing this thing that you're doing? Yeah. And it's hard to keep surging ahead with what you know is true to you.
Yeah, trying to stick true to who you are and take those risks, and really just sort of block out the voices of other people. As you said, most of my friends were doing a 2-year. A lot of my close mates did go live in London. They did the Aussie thing where you go over and get a 2-year work holiday visa. You spend a bit of time in London working in a pub or whatever you did, and then you did some trips. But they'd all come home, and that was their overseas. It's like, yep, I got it out of my system. Whereas I went overseas, I was like, why would you want to get it out of your system? I don't understand. But a lot of people had those strong values, or the desire to want to come home and start a family and live in a small town close to their parents, or start a career that kept them in one place, which was great. But it wasn't my thing. I guess my calling was to keep seeing the world, and it hasn't been easy for sure. But it's I think the hardest part is actually trying to convince other people that it's okay.
I've given up convincing or worrying about what other people think. And don't get me wrong, like I've not lived a life similar to yours. Like lived overseas for a little bit, had some challenges. Like I wasn't able to step into a job, and I've been deported, and then trying to sort of go back, it's cost me personally, professionally, like you know, all the things. Yeah. And the fact that I've only probably now in my early 40s come to a point of like I'm a people pleaser by nature. My psychologist has brought this to my attention, so that's great. It's good to know how the influence your parents have on you. Hey, Mum, how's it going? Love you. And now I'm more comfortable with like what I'm doing, where I'm going, because for many years you spend listening too much to the outside voice, or even sometimes the inside voice, the inner critic about what other people think. The only person, I'm trying to please so many people, the only person I wasn't pleasing was myself. And it can at times be a miserable existence.
Oh, it's horrible. Yeah, and you constantly are trying to fit into other people's lives. One example of that is coming home. I would always make a huge effort to try and come back to Australia for Christmas, weddings, whatever it would be. And when I am home for whether it's a short amount of time, I would always go to catch up with 10 different friends and say, oh, I'll come to you, I'll drive there, I'll do this. And you burn yourself out. And I learned after quite a while that none of them were making the effort to want to see me. Some did, but they're the good close friends that you can always keep in touch with. So it got to the point where instead of having and going away, catch up with lots of people, you'd say, hey, I'm going to be at this bar. If anyone wants to come and say good day, come along. And your good friends would come. Otherwise, it's like, I'm not going to spend my 2 weeks at home trying to see 10 different people on 10 different nights. It's exhausting.
I even felt the same. And you're doing international trips, which cost you a lot.
Yeah,
and especially when I'm guessing you're eking out an existence doing comedy. Even sometimes when I go back to, not so much now, like I said, it doesn't worry me too much. But I would go back home to WA from Melbourne or wherever, and there were some people who would get annoyed that you wouldn't make the effort to catch up with them. It's like, well, look, here's where I'm going to be. If you want to cut now, it's like if you want to get around that, come to the pub. Yeah, that's great. And look, I'll say good problems to have that people want to see you. But it does. It's not as easy as you would think. Yeah, and also you have to try and balance expectations. And some people just have moved on as well. I mean, that's another thing you learn as you get older is people have their own lives. They are raising kids or they've got something happening, and they're not, they're not living. Not that I'm out going to bars. I don't drink much anymore. But the idea of 7 nights a week, someone could be available to catch up. Most people now in my age group, Monday to Friday, they wouldn't even consider leaving their house. They go, that doesn't make sense. Why would you? No, we couldn't do it. It's just another day of the week. You know? Take a risk. Well, it reminded me of last year when we actually were in Barcelona at the same time. And and then we realised probably a little bit too tricky. And I was like, look, it was probably going to be a bit tricky with around the plans, but only because I knew I would be seeing you back when you got that. You flew out on grand final day, I believe. That's right. That's right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, early in the morning. Yeah, yes. We only heard it. I only knew you were there like the night before, I think. So yeah, I mean that's I've had people living in other countries who would say, when are you coming back to do shows? Let us know. Like Toronto, for example, where you and I had both lived. I had good friends there who said, oh, let us know next time you're coming back, and then 2 years go by and I go, hey guys, I've got a whole run of shows happening in Toronto. And I would get to Toronto after letting them know and they go, yeah, we've got dinner planned. And I'm like, cool. I don't care, but I flew from Australia. So you can have dinner before the gig. Fuck that. No, that's I think we can sort of but then you realise sometimes there's people who are in your friendship orbit throughout your life, and you realise sometimes they orbit close, sometimes they orbit far away. And now I've learned to say that's fine, that's their priority. It's all good. No hate, no ill will. I'll just remember that and probably won't go out of my way to another time.
Yeah, look, I don't hassle people to come to my shows anymore. I think when you start doing comedy early on, you're like desperately asking, "Hey, friends, can you come to my shows?" Not really early because I was shit at comedy, but there's a point where you want people to come to buy tickets, and then after a long time, you go, "No, I've used up all my favors now," and I also don't want to rely on friends. I've got my audience. People want to come and see me, so that's good. Those who don't come, I go, "Yep, no worries. I'm not going to sit on my phone 5 minutes before a gig, messaging all my friends anymore, saying, 'Hey, where are you? Why aren't you here?' Because that was more stressful than actually doing a show or trying to promote it."
Well, I've been privileged enough to see a lot of your shows, but also the work that goes into them when the festival. So it might be like Perth. Is it Perth Fringe? What's Perth called?
Perth Fringe, yeah.
Perth
it's called Fringe World.
Fringe World, that's the one. And you were saying, "Hey, I need to get where's a good place to get some printing done?" And all this sort of. So I was seeing the hustle that goes into just trying to find a venue, fill a venue. And you're competing with some massive names, and it's tough going.
It's a huge showcase. It's like an exhibition, and you're really putting yourself out there. It's a weird thing that you wouldn't do it just outside of a festival because you think, well, I get a better audience without competing with 200 other shows. But being in a festival gives you that extra publicity in a way. It's great networking. It's good to hang out with people. It's a good social thing. But yeah, there is a competition involved, and festivals are a tough thing, but they're also it's a good way to make a living at times.
The thing I've enjoyed the most is I think the show that I've seen is it No Hablas Inglés? Is that the
Hablas Inglés?
Hablas Inglés.
Yeah.
The one last year was up the top of the elephant and wheelbarrow where you dressed as with the tour guide.
Oh yeah. Well, that was my bus chauffeur. So good.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And then, but probably my favourite was the one this year. I forget the name of it. What was your show this year? Cheeky. And I never know what to expect. Got in there, and it's the first time I'd seen you deal with not so much like hecklers, but those people who walked in late. And then they had like a bit of a laugh, but I don't know whether they were like out of it, whatever, and you gave it to them like both barrels and stuff, and they clearly didn't want to sit down or show much respect. Like, well, okay, I'm going to work with this, and you went to work on them.
Yeah, I think this was the first year where I was just doing, the first year in a long time where I was just doing straight stand-up, but I had no narrative in a show. So I had the freedom to go off on a tangent and improvise and play around with the crowd, and I didn't have to tick a bunch of boxes. Like the shows where I've talked about the Hablas Inglés and my Camino show, they're very storytelling shows. They do slides. It's a 1 hour. It has to start on a time. It has to end on a certain thing, so it all comes back to the ending. Start, end. There's a middle. There's a message involved. There's you're getting something there. It's like a show. It'd be like watching The Sixth Sense and then running out of time and you can't get to that last bit. And like, hey, what happens in the end, right? So those shows had to be very strict. And people when people interrupt them or turn up late, I would go crazy in my head because I knew it had to have a certain arc and everything. But whereas a straight stand-up show this year, I was so much more relaxed because I could just mess around. And if I did 40 minutes of material, it didn't matter. If I did 50, great. But it was the crowd were dictating that, and that's their fault. If they got less of a show, then whatever, so be it. But it loosened me up a lot, and I was able to have a lot more fun.
Do you think that'll be something you'll continue with, like to not have a narrative to shows, or just whatever sort of floats your boat?
I really like the narrative shows, but I think they are probably better suited in a theatre. Yep. More of a storytelling kind of a show. They mean a lot to me. I think they have a real place. Straight stand-up's great. I love that. But I could do that for 20 minutes in a club. I don't need to do that for an hour.
Yep.
And I think that's where the way it's going now. I think a lot of people just want to see, instead of seeing a 1 hour stand-up show with one person, doing good jokes, but for 1 hour, they probably rather see 3 different comedians doing 20 minutes each, or like a lineup. But it's unfortunately what's happening is people's attention spans are short now. People just want to watch little clips online. But to do a 1 hour show that has a story, which I love that, and I'll keep doing that. And I'm touring a show at the moment, which is all about that. I love it. Yeah.
Now, tell me you've had some adventures like on the road and things. The one that I still laugh at is when you used your own car and turned it into you're advertising Uber drugs.
Uber drugs, yeah.
And we'll put a link to this in the show notes. So
I do not sell drugs.
It doesn't sell drugs. That's a community service announcement. And it actually got it.
I do not sell drugs.
It got sort of picked up or got kind of, I don't know if it was like viral, but it was getting shared, but you weren't necessarily getting the credit for it. And I see you kind of had to try and fight for a little bit. Tell me about that.
So I was doing a show called Marcos. My name's Marcus. And Narcos was quite big at the time, the Netflix series. So I just used I used that poster, and then I had a photo shoot done to make me look like I was the cover of the poster. So I called it Marcos. And when I traveled through South America, a lot of people would call me Marcos as well. So it was a very fitting sort of thing. And the whole show was basically about times I've been arrested, or I've got in trouble, or I've got out of trouble, or I got held up. Different things that would occur to me. So it was a good themed show. But I thought, how can I promote the show with a bit of a gimmick to get a bit of publicity? I went and I borrowed my mum's old car. It was an old Astra, and it was rusty from the sea air. So they lived by the coast, so it was already rusting a bit on top, and the bonnet was a bit rusted. So I went to this guy who was does body decals on cars, and I said, "Look, I've got an idea that I want to promote my show. Would you do this?" And he goes, "Yep, no worries, sounds fun." And we put my show poster on the bonnet of the car, and that's all I wanted. And while I was there, he goes, "Nah, not good enough." And it looked great. It was amazing. I filmed the whole process. I watched it all. This is great. He goes, "Nah, we need to do something else." And so he actually came up with the idea of putting Uber drugs on the side of the car. And Uber was, I guess this is 2018, so Uber's like getting really big then as well.
Well and truly established.
It was well and truly established, yeah. And drugs has been around pretty
while,
established as well. So we put Uber drugs on the side of the car, and we just lost it. We thought this is the most we loved it. We thought this is so funny, and I didn't care. Like I was like, yeah, whatever. So I think in the logo, so that Uber wasn't going to sue us, he put some marijuana leaves in the logo
to clearly differentiate.
To differentiate, it was a totally different use of the language.
Yep.
And I drove home and I filmed my mum's response and my dad, and they both just shook their head, and they knew, I'm an idiot. Was
the response you expected?
Pretty much. Yep. I think my dad, what's Uber? He had no idea what any of it was. And I got my mum. I took a photo of my mum in front of the car, and then to embarrass her even more in a small town. By the way, I mentioned she worked in a clinic, a pharmacy. For many years, she was well known in the hospital situation and all that. And now I've got her car, which is a known car in the hometown. People knew her car, and because she used to have St Kilda Football Club stickers on the back, so people knew her car. I had Uber drugs on the side of her car, driving it around, so people thought my mum's car was now a drug delivery car. And I took a picture of her in front of the car, and I put that in the local paper to promote my show, which she didn't know about, and she wasn't that happy, but she wasn't.
Has different implications. A local rag, yeah, put it in there as well.
It was very,
but it was parked up outside my place, not outside my place, but down in Richmond near that petrol station for a good couple of weeks.
It was so what you said about fighting for the attention there. The very first day I took the car away from getting it done, somebody had taken a picture of it and posted it to some, I think it was called Brown Onion or one of those.
Brown Cardigan?
Brown Cardigan. Yep. Yeah, I'm thinking of something else. Yeah, brown onions. Thinking about dinner. brown cardigan, and they're very big, social media following, and it went viral. Like the very first day I'd driven it, it went nuts. It had such a huge. It was shared, thousands of times, whatever. But I had no recognition because no one was taking pictures of the bonnet. No one was walking up to the car to see what my name was or what the reason was. They just saw a funny car that said Uber Drugs, and they thought, "Oh, this is a great idea." So I drove it back to the guy the very next day, and I said, "We need to have my social media handles on the side under it." But the damage was done. The original picture was already out there.
First time, and then
And ever since then, I had lots of people take pictures and want to come and take pictures. It didn't really help sell my show at all. People just thought the drugs thing was funny. No one stopped and bothered to look at the bonnet and say, "Hey, come to my show." Yeah, no, we're good. But
it's a fickle world, like the things like virality of things. Like everyone wants that line around the block for their thing, but it's time and time again, you just can't control it. It
was amazing the effect it had, and I knew that it worked. Of course, it did what it did. It got attention, but it didn't translate into ticket sales at all. I had people driving along freeways next to me who, when you're driving a car with that kind of signage on, or any signage, you forget that it's on the car. And I had people honking their horn, shout like what are you? And I realised, oh yeah, that's right, I'm in the car that says Uber Drugs. And one guy held up a bag of weed and tooted his horn like, "Yay!" I had a guy. I got pulled over by the super troopers. What are they called? The patrol cars driving to Adelaide.
The highway patrol.
The highway patrol. Yeah, and they pulled me up just coming into near Adelaide, just outside of Adelaide, and they pulled me up, and he said, "What's going on?" I said, "I don't know. I wasn't speeding." And he goes, "I had to pull you over." I was, "Oh right, yeah, I forgot." And he had his camera. The coppers have those vests with the cameras and stuff. And he was filming everything. And I'm in the window going, "Is this on camera, is it?" "Yeah." "All right. Well, if anyone's going to be in Adelaide, my show is," I was just promoting it to the coppers.
You have a giggle?
Yeah, I got a photo with him in the car.
Oh, yes. I remember that.
I got pulled over many times by police, and not once did they ever look in the car. So
So you might be onto something as far as like just overtly when you've got a contraband, just go Uber whatever, Uber dead body, and they won't
broad
look in the
daylight. Uber dead body.
For the next show, as long as I get credit for the joke, that's fine.
Yeah. But again, not one person. But I did have, I think in Richmond, I did have a guy cycle up next to my window. I just pulled up. I was just about to get out of the car, and I had the window cracked just a tiny bit. And I had a tap on the window, and I freaked out. It was like midnight. It was dark. I didn't know what was going on, and this guy tapped on the window. And he was on a push bike, possibly stolen, and he's like, "Hey." I said, "Oh, what?" And he goes, "Have you got any drugs?" I said, "Oh, mate, it's just a joke." And he goes, "Well, it's not very funny."
Think about the druggies, mate.
I know. So he genuinely, and I thought, so I had to put a sign on the dash from then on, like, "There's no drugs kept on premises," like that kind of thing. This is a show. Come on, guys, let it go.
It's a good point. Yeah, we would have lost a window.
So I had to, that car's now living on a farm. It's gone to retirement.
Well, speaking of cars or transport and shitty segues.
Great segue, though.
You were, like a lot of performers, impacted when the world came to a halt with COVID a few years ago. And obviously you had the wisdom, you pivoted and started a new business. But I want you to tell me about, you had a show booked and back in Wonthaggi. Promoting it, and it was... It got cancelled. I'm not sure if it went, but you invested a lot, probably. I feel like emotionally, and that was like your hometown show. Tell me about that.
So 2020, I'd been touring in Europe. 2019, came back to do the Perth Fringe World, Adelaide Fringe, and then I was in Adelaide middle of March when the world shut down. I had a big show in my hometown, 400-seat theatre booked. It was going to be my 20th year having done comedy. So I kind of felt like 2020, my 20th year, I'd been to 50 countries, I think, doing comedy. So there was a lot of round numbers where I felt like, oh, this is a good way to celebrate my homecoming. I've never done a big show in my hometown. Let's film a gig. I booked out my home theatre, 400 seats, sold it out. I spent months promoting it, doing it all myself. And then 4 weeks before the show, the world shut down. Mm. And I not only lost that gig, but I'd planned to do 2 weeks at the Melbourne Comedy Festival, which would have led right into it. So I would have been really stage fit, ready to go, you know. So all of that work, Melbourne and my hometown gig, was all gone overnight. And I was just devastated. I ended up going home to where my parents were and to lay low until I was like, I couldn't understand that we still couldn't do the show. I was like, come on, can't we just, some people, you know, no, couldn't do it. So it took 2 years before I built the courage to do that show again. But it was such an emotionally draining experience to lose that gig. It was, just devastating. Yeah.
And bouncing back from that, you briefly touched on it before, you stepped into a new gig.
Yeah.
Which I thought was great. And tell me how Chauffeur So Good came about.
I think at the time I worked so hard and wanted to be a full-time comedian. When you're starting out in comedy, all you ever want to do, and for a lot of people they have different goals, but for me, my only goal in life was to just become a comedian and just to live off stand-up comedy. And so I made that happen. I did that as a life. Like I was able to do that. And whether you become famous or have a TV job, radio, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. My goal had been reached, right? And so, but I never wanted to have another job. It was always a backward step to do something else. I could never bring myself to go back to a
just
real
a
job.
Line you never wanted to
Yeah,
cross.
it seemed just not dirty, but like I just thought, oh no, that's a really backwards move. So when the world shut down, I just couldn't comprehend going back to a job. Like, you know, a lot of my friends did, a lot of other artists did. We all lost everything, which made it easier, I guess, in a way, to accept that you have to do something else. Otherwise, you just sit around waiting. So a lot of my friends were doing bar work, labouring, whatever it was, but I was back at my parents' place, hanging out, trying to figure it out, and I ended up buying a bus because I thought I had some money in the bank, which was good. But a friend of mine and we said, let's just go to some wineries, like local wineries and stuff, and have some drinks while we're waiting for the world to open. And the world just didn't open because being in Victoria, we were just locked down for so long. But I'd heard about this thing called the NEIS program. It's for entrepreneurs and new enterprise scheme or something. So they basically pay you to study a TAFE program in business course. And I studied this thing online. It was I'm a bad student, but I did it. I forced myself to do it. And I kind of knew the business skills anyway. I'd been doing this as a comedian for years. I was already self-promoting. I was already doing my own admin and all the things that you had to do to run a business as a comedian. And all I had to do was translate that into another business. So I thought, I'll buy a bus. It was a 12-seater bus. I'll start doing some jobs where I take people to pubs and wineries and weddings and things. And I'll do that just for a few months until the world opens again, and I'll go back overseas, sell the bus to a backpacker, whatever. Or if things go really bad, I can convert the bus into a camper van and travel around Australia. Now, we got stuck in Victoria. I wasn't able to travel outside of the country, let alone the state. So the idea of traveling in that bus was not happening. So I thought I better give this a go with a business. And I bought a business name, registered that, phone number, all the things, and created a business, and it took off.
Literally.
It did. It took off. And there was a lot of factors that came into that, where I was in a regional area where there's not much of that competition. There was high demand for it. Public transport's very non-existent down there. And there's a lot of people, own homes that want to get out and go to the local wineries and events and things, and they had no way to get around. So I really found a niche market for it. And since I've started, there's actually been a few other people trying to step in and get into that thing as well, which is
chauffeur wars.
Chauffeur wars, yeah, in a way. Which it's kind of good. I feel like I definitely wasn't the first person to ever come up with it. I mean, it is a glorified taxi in a way, but I have an added thing where I am a comedian. People do book me because they want me on board, which is cool. But I also know that it's a good business. I've taken people sightseeing. I've done cruise ships. I've done concerts, and and I can choose when I work as well, which is very good because I can park the bus up and go overseas for 5 months, which is what I did last year, and come back and do it in the summer period.
And would you say that people who you take on some of these trips would often be or occasionally under the influence of drugs?
Well, yeah, I had to separate. This is when I had to get rid of the Uber drugs car.
Well, the only reason I say that is because it kind of foretold as like you were doing an Uber-like service with people who were on drugs. Not everyone, just some guests who didn't read the rules. But anyway, that's my attempt at segueing a little joke in there. But I need to
edit in the sound, canned laughter.
Yes. But I need to confess something to you about that business, is that obviously it's based on a play on words like so far, so good,
so far, so good, yeah.
For the longest time, I thought it was, I can't believe I'm saying this, it was based on that song Hurt So Good, like Hurt So Good. I was like, chauffeur so good, come on baby. And that's what I thought it was for like 12 months. So when I'd see your marketing, I'd be like,
so good.
Hurt So Good.
Is that John Mellencamp?
I think it is.
Yeah, so when I become a franchised fleet of buses and I have to do a TV commercial, like the good guys do the Beach Boys, good guys. I can see if I can get that song involved.
Perfect. That'd make my heart sing, mate, and just put me out of my misery of something so embarrassing.
You know, the first one, there was loads of people that would have no idea. Even after I told them, I'd say, no, it's so far so good. So far so good. They go, oh. And then half an hour later, they go, oh, like it didn't sink in.
I think it's the nuance, because I say chauffeur, but some people say chauffeur. So my poor pronunciation probably...
It started in regional Victoria, so I try and
chauffeur?
Give it a real Aussie chauffeur. Chauffeur, so good. Oh, chauffeur, so good.
Just need to add the whistle, like the bloke on the radio, and then you chauffeur, so good.
Well, chauffeur, so good. The good thing with it is that there's been loads of TV shows and loads of people use the expression "so good" a lot, or even just "so far, so good." You hear it a lot, and every time I hear it, I just think, "Oh yeah, there's a little bit more recognition for the brand."
Yep, just copyright the so far, so good.
So far, so good.
People do.
The annoying thing is people can't spell chauffeur. So people try and look it up and they just type in, so I've got VIP van number plates, which is amazing, by the way. I've had people look at my number plates and it is VIP van, and people go, is that fake? And I go, no, it was actually just available. And when I got those number plates, I searched to see if VIP bus was available, if I was to franchise and go bigger. And someone owns those plates and they want to sell them for like 50 grand. So
you've got a little nest egg there.
Potentially my number plates are worth more than the bus itself. But the thing I'm most proud of with the business is that the phone number, this is so pathetically sad how I did this. But do you remember the old days when you'd get a new phone number, you went to 7-Eleven or somewhere and they had the physical cards with the numbers, and you could choose your number, but the guy would just bring out a few and you go, oh, I like that. That's got a couple of, sequences.
Consecutive digits.
Yeah, so that was it. But now it's online and it's almost like the one-arm bandit with the brrr, brrr, and it refreshes the sequences. So I wanted to have... VIP van in the number or something like that, just to have some kind of recognition. And then I realized my business is so fast, so good, and so good is 6, right?
Yep.
And so my phone number, you could choose like 5 numbers, and then the next 5 or whatever it was were just refreshed. So I sat there for about an hour, chose the first digits that would lead into So Good. So I got the SO and I had to keep refreshing over and over and over. Eventually, my phone number says 0431 So Good.
That's what it says now?
Yeah. I didn't have to pay for it.
How good?
It's just a regular, So Good.
It reminds me of that ad, the stuff you put on the milk. So good on your cereal.
I want to do a collab. Yeah. Every time I see that, So Good. So Good.
So good.
So good.
Yep, get in touch on 0402 So Good.
But I think the cheekiest thing I've done, so that's why the last year's show was called, or this year's show was called Cheeky. I've done a lot of cheeky marketing things like the Uber drugs and those kind of things. I think the cheekiest thing I did was the year before I did a stand-up comedy show, which you saw, which was, I just basically called the show for So Good. And all it was, and I only did the show in Victoria because it's where my business is. I only did the show purely as a marketing campaign for my business so that anyone who came to the show would then know that I've got a bus business, and I gave out business cards after the show, and guaranteed I've had fair amount of business from doing that show.
Smart.
And now everyone who comes on my bus, I tell them about my comedy show. So it's a cross promotion. It's actually worked out really well.
It's rather serendipitous, mate. I like that.
It's annoying in a way now because I have to run a business as well as want to leave the business and travel the world.
And speaking of, mate, you've got some travel coming up. You're off to Japan soon?
Yeah, I'm off to do the Kumano Kodo. I just don't know how to pronounce it yet, but Kumano Kodo. And it's I walked across Spain. I did the Camino de Santiago years ago, and that is a pilgrimage, a very famous one. And they've got a sister pilgrimage, which is in Japan, which is the Kumano Kodo. So they're two UNESCO World Heritage Caminos. So I plan to do that, and then I'll be hiking up Mount Fuji, which feels like a lot easier than it will be. I think it's going to be quite difficult, but it's been a long time since I've done a big mountain hike. So it's an overnight one, but it's close to 4,000 meters, I think, 3,700 or something. So yeah, I'm excited and going through the stages of getting my body ready.
Mate, it's interesting you say that. It reminds me of the first time I went to Japan. I say first time like I've been more than once.
Yeah.
The time I went to Japan, snowboarding in the south, and all we want to do is like snowboard some powder, big mountains, more than arguably a bit bigger than Hotham or Buller and all those sort of things. It's a joke. And we're sporting around, and on the chairlift, when you get up there, it's got a whiteboard that has how many deaths there's been on the mountain that week.
Oh,
so
really?
there've been like 4.
Yeah.
And we go up, and I was like, oh, it's a bit grim. Okay, you go snowboarding, that's fine. And I'm a competent snowboarder without being good.
Yeah. And
so we do a couple of runs, and then I see someone have a big stack, a massive stack. You're like, ooh, that's a bit of a rough one. Keep going. And then you go back around, and they must have been injured quite badly. The next run I did, all the first aid people there, the medicos or ski ambulance people, whatever, are there. And as I go past, they just pull the sheet over the top of the person, and I've like, that person's died. And so I just sort of
unless they're having a little sleep, they're bed sheets.
So I get down the bottom. I was like, I don't know if I want to snowboard anymore. That person, I've just seen someone die, and my friends come in. They go, "Dust, what's wrong?" I said, "I just saw someone's fucking dead. I saw it happen." And they're like, "Oh," I said, "Yeah." The medics got up there and had put the person in the stretcher and just pulled the sheet over and dead. I said, and they go, "Dust, that person's not actually dead." Like, what do you mean? I said, they pull the sheet over so they don't get snow on them when they ski them down the hill. And so I thought this person had fucking died. And it was like literally, nah, that's it, no more trial, I just want to need it. And like, I realised that, nah, mate, that's fine. Like, it's okay. Like, it's all right. And anyway, put the snowball back on, like away we go.
Away to go,
yeah, but awkward. And I'd already started to text some friends. Like, I just saw someone die, but no, there wasn't a death. On
you were
that
fine
day.
then. Yeah. I snowboarded once. I was 22. I was in Germany with a friend. My first time in Europe, and we went to a Garmisch-Partenkirchen in Germany, and it was you know the place, and it was where the Olympics were in 1930s. We shouldn't talk about that one, but my buddy's crazy guy. He basically took us down black runs straight away, and I'd never snowboarded in my life. It was icy as hell. Really horrible conditions to be learning to snowboard, falling over constantly. But we're in Europe, and kids learn to ski and snowboard from when they start walking. And I was falling over in pain, hating myself, hating life, not wearing the right equipment because I was borrowing bicycle pants that for rain covers and stuff, like just terrible setup. And little kids who were like 4 or 5 just ski past and they
gives you the shits.
And a little German, you think they're arrogant, but they so good at it. And they come and help you, and they go, "Do you need a hand to get up?" And they're like, "Get away!"
Just the kids who don't even have skis and they just follow all in a little line, like with the spiky helmets and stuff. And you're like,
we made the mistake of drinking every night, so it was our fault.
Probably not peak performance activities.
No, but anyway, it was a good time, but never again. Yeah.
Now, mate, I want to know, as we ask all the guests, what are your core values?
I think they've changed. I think, and I'm excited to know that they will change even more. But it's in recent years, it's become compassion a lot more. I've become a lot more compassionate, and in the sense that I've become quite more altruistic as well. And it's hard to do that without feeling like you want to pat yourself on the back sometimes. But I really want to give back to people a lot more. I've certainly taken a lot in my life, as far as I felt very guilty that I've been a very selfish person in the sense of wanting to travel, wanting to see the world. It's always been I want to do this, I want to do that. And fighting against that thing of like, well, I don't want to have the family. I don't want to have that, do those things. But I want to give back to people in another sense of raising money for charities. I'm very interested in wanting to give back to my community, which my community is anywhere. But that's the other thing. I struggle having a place. So I think compassion and thinking about other people is something I value very strongly, and trying to give to people who don't have what you have is something that means a lot to me. Whether it be just helping a stranger or doing random things for people that don't expect it, being there for people, but also risk. Risk is a huge thing I value. If you don't take risks in life, you won't achieve. And I quit my job to become a comedian. I didn't know where that was going to be. I moved overseas without knowing what to do. I've done a lot. I've achieved a lot of the things that I've wanted to do through just taking a chance. And I think it's important to have an element of risk in life. It's just that. It's just an old cliche, I suppose, but you're never going to know if you don't give it a shot. You know? And sitting back waiting for things to happen is something I used to do. But now I just know you've got to push yourself and work hard. So I don't know. There's too many values in there, but there's a lot of like a pinch of pie, a pinch from everything. Compassion. You've got to have diversity. You've got to really want to expand. I like being open-minded to lots of different things, but trying to understand different people as well for where they're coming from too. So I think for someone who's lived a very transient life, it's very hard for me to have values that other people have, as far as a lot of people are very homebodied and family orientated and things like that. I'm very connected to parts of that, but I'm not. It doesn't bother me if I don't see people constantly, but it does bother me that I want to be able to constantly do things for people wherever I can.
Love it, mate. What's next?
Antarctica. If anyone runs a gig in Antarctica, I mean Mount Fuji for sure is the next climb, and doing that Camino. But I'm bringing my Camino show. I toured that around the world last year, and it's called Eat, Pray, Walk. So it's all about it went from a comedy show, and I think this is one of the things where the value became important, is I realized through doing comedy I can actually help people, not just through making them laugh and forget about life for an hour, but I was doing this storytelling show which has become a very inspiring show. Not my words, that's the reviewers, but they constantly say it's motivating, it's inspiring, and I get people crying and sharing their stories afterwards. So I'm developing that show, and I'm hopefully going to tour that a lot more and create a book from that, and maybe take that into the keynote speaking kind of world, because I think it's the kind of show that's got that potential for it, and it's a nice stepping stone away from just doing dick jokes and straight stand up and gimmicks. So that's important to me, to want to leave behind something nice for people. Beautiful.
We'll put all the information on how to get in touch with you and follow along in the show notes. But Marcus Ryan, a comedian, bus driver, and my mate, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thanks, Dusty. Appreciate it.